That's Summer Sausage, Not Salami is the 14th episode of the 4th season of Two and a Half Men. This is directed by Gary Halvorson, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And the first thing I want to say is that this taught me something. In fact, it taught me two things. It taught me about summer sausage and acidophilus milk. We'll get to the milk in a little bit, but the reason it taught me about summer sausage is because I don't think we have it in the UK. I had to Google what it was, and then I was trying to see if we had it in the UK or what it might be called, if it's under a different name, and I couldn't find anything that said we have it, but it's called this, or we have it, but it's not that common. So if anybody in the UK knows what we call it, or if we have it and I've just never seen it, I'd be very keen to find out. But either way, I now know what summer sausage is. The episode starts off with Charlie coming in with a woman called Vanessa, and Alan is rather annoyed at Charlie because Jake had access to Charlie's computer. He was watching some adult videos. Apparently they weren't that hardcore, but nevertheless. And Vanessa was actually in those videos. And then Berta comes into the room and is also annoyed because Alan keeps putting acidophilus milk on the shopping list. Berta keeps getting 2%, and, well, they're both annoyed by the situation. And another fun fact, we don't have 2% milk in the UK, at least not readily available. Full-fat milk or whole milk has about 3 or 4%, and semi-skimmed milk is about 1.8. So it's pretty close to semi-skimmed milk. And I don't believe we have acidophilus milk either. I googled that, and we have similar things, but certainly not under that name. So this actually gave me quite a bit of an education, I have to say. This scene ends with Charlie slipping on the skateboard. Not a bad way to end things. Then the main narrative kicks in, and there's a knock at the door, and it's a woman called Danielle Stewert, played by Brooke. She is Charlie's new neighbour. Immediately, he sees that she is very attractive, and they have a brief conversation, and it's quite a heavy conversation, actually, because within a matter of minutes of meeting each other, Danielle finds out that Charlie doesn't want to get married and he doesn't really care for children. That's a lot of heavy ground to cover when you've just met somebody for the first time. Berta comes in with the drinks and Danielle asks if there is any acidophilus milk. I don't know how she could tell it wasn't acidophilus milk in the jugs. I guess she just assumed. And Charlie decides, unbeknownst to Danielle, he's going to set Alan up with her. Yes, he wants to sleep with her, but he's thinking long term. And he realises that if Alan goes out with Danielle and they get married, he'll move out, Charlie will get his house back. It seems like a pretty solid plan. And Alan comes into the kitchen and Charlie tells him about this, and he doesn't tell him the long plan of getting him out of the house. He just thinks he's going to set him up with somebody he might quite like. And Alan asks, why would she want me? And I have to say, the description of himself he gives is pretty brilliant. Alan says, I'm broke, middle-aged, twice divorced, sleeping on your hide-a-bed and sharing custody of a flatulent, underachieving son. I think that's a pretty brilliant, rather accurate description. And all Charlie says is, we're going to need a bigger basket, which I really liked. He's referring to the gift basket, the welcome basket that he put together for Danielle, or at least for Alan to give to Danielle. And then we cut to both of them going up to Danielle's front door, and she answers, and Alan says, welcome. And then he says, welcome again. And then he branches out and says, you're welcome. And then he starts talking about gas. So it's not the strongest start for Alan, but Charlie realises that if this is going to work, Charlie needs to get out of the picture, and Danielle and Alan end up going off to a restaurant on their own. And then we cut to some time later, and Alan and Danielle have been going out for a little bit of time, and she's coming over again, so Alan is rushing to the shower to get dressed, and she comes over. And I have to say, I didn't love Charlie's behaviour here. That's not to say it's not in keeping with the character. I'm not saying it's badly written or anything, but to say that we, in the episode, have seen him stepping aside, yes, really for personal reasons and personal gain, but he is stepping aside from Danielle so that Alan can find true love, even if there are selfish reasons, to what he does next, I think is quite a big leap, because Danielle admits that she's cutting back on drinking because she has a habit of getting drunk and sleeping around. Charlie realises that she's a lot like him, And he wants her now. Alan's going to have to step aside, but he doesn't want to step aside, so they both say, well, they'll let the best man win. And they end up having this argument in front of her. And the reason I didn't love Charlie's behaviour here, one, just because he's basically treating Danielle like an object now, and two, he gave her alcohol. And I think for anybody to listen to somebody saying they have a drinking problem or their behaviour is not the best when they're drunk and they're actively trying to not drink, to then ply them with alcohol, I think is not great. Yes, she's a grown woman, she can make her own decisions, but at the same time, I think Charlie was really irresponsible in doing that and very, very selfish because obviously it was for his own personal gain. And then, well, she decides that she's just going to have to sleep with both of them. And ultimately she ends up leaving and slipping on the skateboard as well. The final scene, I think, definitely was meant to be funny. Of course it was meant to be funny, but I found it to be very sinister. I'm overthinking it, of course, but it was just kind of my initial reaction is that's really creepy. Because Charlie is in the grocery store. He's getting the milk for Alan, and he meets another woman, or he meets a woman who drinks acidophilus milk, and she makes a comment on it, and then she walks off, and Charlie talks to his penis again, as he did earlier in the episode, and initially he's saying no, he told Berta he'd get the groceries, so he can't do anything about being attracted to this woman, and then he decides, actually, forget it, I want this, and he puts the basket down and goes after her. And that's very creepy, because basically he's just gone after a woman to sleep with her. That just seems really, even for 2.5 Men, that seems quite sinister. But it's not the worst thing in the world. I just found it to be maybe a little bit creepier than I would have liked. But in general, That's Summer Sausage, Not Salami is an okay episode. Not necessarily the funniest, but I think there are some interesting bits. It definitely felt like a very quick episode. Like, not necessarily not a lot happened, but there wasn't necessarily a variety in what was happening. Each scene was quite a good length, quite a long length. So that made it feel like there wasn't a lot of variety, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I just generally prefer the episodes when there's a lot more going on. I feel like they give us more of an opportunity for comedy, because then each shorter scene will have comedic moments in them. Whereas if the scenes are longer, it sometimes takes a little bit longer to get to the comedy, to get to the point. And I feel like this is the case here. But it's not a bad episode. I don't think I'd skip it. If I was binge watching season 4 again, I doubt I'd skip it. But it's also not an all-time favourite. It's fine. That's Summer Sausage, Not Salami. Taught me a few things. And ultimately, it's not a bad episode of 2.5 Men.